So this is the Citizen Effect Podcast. This is episode 1B of our pilot episodes. In episode 1A, I got to interview my law partner and best friend of more than 10 years now, Devin. And now we're going to turn the tables. He's going to interview me. I am Keith Whiddon. I am Whiddon Criminal Defense and one half of Erase My Arrest. Devin, I'll let you introduce yourself since I did the introduction for you last time.
Devin Jones, and I am Eorm Young Law and one half of Erase My Arrest. And today is Keith's turn in the hot seat. Hopefully today we find out a little bit about Keith, but the Citizen Effect is the concept of finding something and leaving it better than what you found it. And hopefully today we hear about what we found with Keith. Now, Keith, we talked about a lot in my podcast, my interview, that you got to grill me about where I came from. I know that people take a look at these photos you do and they say, this is Keith Whiddon. He must always come from the big city. Tell us where you came from.
So I came from a place that is far away from here, little bitty small parish in central Louisiana, close to Toledo Bend, named Vernon Parish. And Vernon Parish is one reason why it's notable would be because it is where Fort Polk is. I grew up 20 minutes north of Fort Polk. Family was not in the military. My mother, her father, my grandfather, was in the military, was in the Air Force, served more than 20 years. And my dad, he was never in the military. Both my parents are educators, and I grew up in a little bitty town called Hornbeck, which is 20 minutes north of Fort Polk. Went to a little bitty school with my graduating class being only 26 people, and this was a public K through 12 school. And I would say that growing up there kind of made me the man I am today, although maybe not always in the most flattering of ways. I don't know if we're going to dive into this right off the top, but I've kind of alluded to it already. Being from a small town like that, where the population was more or less 100% white, that can do some things to you, and you see a lot of things and hear a lot of things growing up that if you let sink in, you'll become that person.
Well, let's bring it down the street now. We're going to dive deep, but
we're not going that heavy out the gate.
Yeah. You know, Keith, you and I, we met in law school. I remember you pulled up one day, and they said there's this guy coming from Monroe. You pulled up, we ate at Kiefer's restaurant, which has received many of my student loan dollars. I hope they're very proud. They can't be discharged, so don't worry about it. I'm not coming to get them back. But that said, I remember the first time I met you, you told me that you were a teacher, and I think that's something that a lot of people in this area that have practiced with you don't understand. You were had went to school to be a school teacher, is that correct?
Yeah, so both my parents were educators, and I went to ULM. Thought I was going to be in pharmacy school, and chemistry is not my thing, so that would have been like putting a square peg in a round hole. And figuring out really quickly that chemistry was not my thing. I enjoyed English. I enjoyed being in front of people, working with people, reading and writing. So English education seemed to be the perfect fit for me, and that is what I put myself into. Was very involved at ULM in student government and things like that, and went on and was a student teacher at Neville High School, as well as Richwood High School and Ouachita High School and the former Lee but now Neville Junior High School.
So you bring an educational background into this place, and everybody's seen it by now. Everybody knows that you're the DWI attorney, and that's what you do. And I can remember the day that me and you discussed you becoming the DWI attorney. And we talked about how you were going to really drill down into this practice of criminal law and you were going to learn DWIs. But I think something that's lost on people is that you had a first job that was not criminal defense. Tell the listeners what that job was. How did that experience bring you to criminal defense?
Well, so I started my career at a little firm here in town. Or I say little firm, it's actually one of the bigger firms, or at the time was one of the bigger firms in town. It was small relative to Butler Snow and things like that I'd seen in Jackson. But again, about probably 9 lawyers in the firm at the time, and I was doing workers' compensation defense. I was under the tutelage of who is a really great lawyer in Don Anselmo, a really great lawyer and a really great and respectable person as well. But there was, and I even remember I'll get to this. I remember learning this, or trying to learn it, I should say, trying to learn insurance defense, and it would never, ever click. I just didn't get it. It was kind of like biology in high school. I didn't get biology. I didn't get biology in college. It just didn't make sense to me, and insurance defense was the same way. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It didn't click for me. And I remember after being in that firm for 4, 5, 6 months, waking up and looking in the mirror and thinking to myself, I did not go to law school to do this. And I also remember in May, there was some moving and shaking going on with people in offices. And I was asking you, hey, is Jerry at the DA's office? Is he going to have anything open up? Is there going to be a chance for me to come over there? I was looking for a way out, and lucky for me, that firm walked in one day, very early August, and it was a Friday at lunch. The 2 managing partners sat down across from me and said, hey, Keith, we need to talk. They shut the door, and they said, hey, it's not working out, and we're going to have to let you go.
Just like one of those Coach O moments where you said even Ray Charles could see that?
Yeah, basically. And I just said, okay, and I left, came and got my stuff the next Saturday, or that Saturday, and that was the last time I was in that office. I bounced around for a couple weeks doing just some one-off writing and research for other lawyers here in town, and then landed at a job in legal services representing children in need of care or children in the foster system or in the DCFS system.
I remember those times when you came in there, and I remember when you told me about what had happened at the law firm, and I mean, we're best friends at that point, and I thought one day he's going to think this is the best thing that ever happened to him. And you went to legal services, and I watched you work with these people in legal services, and eventually ended out with your own firm. What I don't think most people understand about what they see now, explain to people what your first 60 days looked like at this firm that you went to, because you did go to a firm to kind of learn underneath the guy who had talked you into leaving legal services underneath the auspiciousness that you were going to learn everything from this person. Tell me what those first 60 days of learning look like.
Yeah, so my opening my own law firm was quite a trip. As a backstory, whenever I was at legal aid or legal services for 6 months, and in 6 months I appeared in every courthouse that there has ever been conceived, and even some things that were not meant to be courthouses but were turned into courthouses in Lake Providence. And every judge, every prosecutor from, again, Lake Providence down to St. Joseph through to Farmerville. So every judge, every prosecutor, and in meeting those people, and in the DCFS or foster care system, you also meet a lot of public defenders, because a public defender is assigned to represent the parents. Well, in Monroe City Court, there I sat between 2 men. One of them is a mentor of mine to this day. His name is Bobby Manning, and truly a mentor and a value to me. The other person I sat between in Monroe City Court was a gentleman by the name of Ken Trahan. Ken was a lifelong bankruptcy lawyer, and he was a public defender for parents in DCFS or in the foster care system. And Ken had terrible health. He was waiting for a heart transplant. He said after about 4 or 5 months in, he said, "Hey, Keith, I'm in really bad health and I'm going to need a heart transplant soon. And my biggest fear is that whenever I have to go down for this heart transplant, no one's going to be there to run the office. I tell you what, if you come in and, I've got space in my office, I can get you a spot on the public defender board so that way you'll have some money. You can get on the curator list. That'll get you, a few $100 here and there. And I'm going to teach you how to do bankruptcy." And I said, okay. And I made that decision that I was going to go out and join up with Ken in March. And I had my last day at Legal Services, sometime in April. And my first day in my brand new office as a firm owner, entrepreneur, solo practitioner was on April 15, 2015. Ken Trahan had been in the hospital in New Orleans, Louisiana, waiting for that heart transplant. Mind you, he was not in the hospital before that. He was out, being a lawyer. On April 7th, he went to New Orleans and was checked into a hospital. He and I talked over FaceTime or Skype, whatever the video messaging app of the day was in 2015. And I sorted through his mail and things like that. And then on May 1st, he passed away. And then after his funeral and everything like that, me and the attorney who owned the entire building, Ken's office and then my office was upstairs. And Malcolm DeSalle, who is now deceased, also a wonderful lawyer, been in the community or was in the community for decades upon decades. Malcolm and I were sitting down on the first floor in his office, just drinking coffee around 7:30 in the morning, as we had done for the last few weeks. And Malcolm, in a way that only Malcolm can, and with that thing that he always did, looked over at me and said, "Well, Keith, you already moved in upstairs. You want to just rent the place?" And I looked at Malcolm and I said, "Malcolm, what other choice do I have?"
I think on month 1, you never got to day 60 with your mentor, did you?
I think that it was basically at negative 6, negative 6 days with a mentor.
So you're out on your own. You've met these people. What brings you to be Keith Whiddon, the DWI attorney? What crawled in your head and said, not only am I going to do criminal defense, which I'd never done, but I'm going to do DWIs?
Well, so between Ken and Malcolm both, I did get a spot on the public defender board representing people with misdemeanors in Monroe City Court. And in Louisiana, a public defender job is a part-time gig. You get 1099 at the end of the year. They don't supply a phone line, a secretary, a law book, and not a thing. You get a $500 stipend, and they wish you the best of luck. And so I'm up there, and I'm working my public defender cases, and I'm also taking in all these divorces and child custody cases and wills and car wrecks and slip and falls and some other stuff I really had no business doing in the first place. And I'm just, plugging along, trying to make a dollar where I can. I figure out really quickly that, gosh, I do not like doing this, whether that was wills, whether that was divorces, but I did enjoy my public defender cases. I enjoyed criminal defense cases. I enjoyed those types of cases, and I got good results for clients. My clients were happy that I got them diversion. They were happy that I would get them a good plea deal. They were happy that I'd say, yeah, sure, let's just try the case. Why not? If you say you didn't do it, if you say it's not you, let's try this thing. And they liked that. And I said, you know what? I don't like this other stuff. I really don't feel like I'm any good at it either, but I feel like I'm really good at criminal defense. I feel like I get really good results. And around that same time, about 2 years later, I went to a one-day DWI training where the person basically broke down, this is what makes a DWI, and these are all the weak points. This is how you win DWI cases. And I saw that, I heard it, and I said, and it was me and 4 other lawyers in a room in a hotel, and I said, I can do that. And so I signed up, and that's been my focus ever since, is learning DWI law.
From the time that you said in your head, I'm going to be a DWI attorney, was anybody specifically in this market a DWI attorney? I mean, it just seems that I remember at the time you did it, it just seemed like such a bold move, and almost as if you were pigeonholing yourself into a practice that was just going to be so limited. What did that market look like when you got into it?
So you have the old guard, or the traditional people that people always go to, and those are good lawyers because they've been around for decades. You don't practice law for decades, especially in a particular practice area, by mistake. And so I was going up against people who were giants of the space, giants of the market. And the first thing I did, one of the first things I did is I went and talked to them. I went and sat down with them, and I said, hey, look, I'm trying to get this criminal defense thing and this DWI thing right. What do I need to know as a young lawyer? And they gave me some tips and some pointers, and I took those and ran with them. I emulated myself after the other lawyers that I respected. If you ever see me in court, I can guarantee you that you will see me carrying a notebook calendar. And the reason I started carrying that notebook calendar in the first place, it wasn't because I couldn't keep up with my clients' dates. Trust me, I had 3 clients. I could keep up with all their dates just fine. But I looked around the room every time I did go to court, and the people that I respected, the people that I looked up to, they were carrying a notebook calendar, and they had on a good suit. And so I got the best suits that I could afford at the time, and I had a notebook calendar. And that notebook calendar has not left my side since 2015.
I remember me and you having all these discussions about being a DWI attorney. And you were over there, you were on 1 Wood Street, which is it's a similar law office. A lot of people have started their law practices there that are great lawyers. And I remember going in there one day, and I walk in, and there's this long table in your office. And it looks like a 1980s mixer for audio is in there. And I said, Keith, what is this thing? And I remember you telling me, this is a breathalyzer machine, and I have bought one off eBay. And at that point, I said, maybe this guy's onto something. But when was it the moment that you said, hey, I'm onto something?
It was, I still had my public defender contract. And I remember my first DWI trial. And I didn't have all the notebooks and things like that I have for DWI cases now. I didn't have all of the officer training manuals. But I had done a lot of homework. And I'd known that the officers have to follow their training a certain way. They have a certain way to do these field sobriety tests and then administer a breathalyzer test. And I remember that I had nothing more than a paperback book that was written by a lawyer in South Louisiana. And I studied that book getting ready for this public defender DWI trial. And I had the officer, and I cross-examined him for 2 hours based on nothing more than I'd read in that little paperback book. And it was all about his training, his certifications, how he did the horizontal gaze nystagmus, how he did the one-leg stand, how he did the walk and turn test. And I remember at the end of that officer came up to me and said, I've never had anyone cross-examine me like that. You really know your stuff. And I said, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to learn more. And that is where I really felt like, or really even knew, that I was doing something that other people weren't doing.
On your path to this success, we've watched you, and you may not like this at this point. We've watched this metamorphosis of looks come across. I remember 2 years ago, everybody came up to me and said, "Why is this hair long?" Now your hair is short again. Where along the lines did you really start to build the image?
So I remember I've never been afraid of the camera. And so I was always trying to take, I always wanted to, take good pictures. And then I started getting more self-confidence. Metamorphosis, I don't know if that's the right word, or evolution is. I've put myself through a lot of things personally in the last 5-6 years. And I think that really, what I think happened is that because I didn't have peace in my personal life, I could find peace in my professional life. And so I poured as much energy into my professional life as I could stand. And that is how I kept evolving and growing. And I think it's kind of why I stayed the path, why I was able to stay the path, because for the longest time, I could only find peace within the four walls of my office or within the four walls of a courtroom.
As you've grown through this, I think there's things out there that I remember when you told me, you said, "Hey, I'm on this thing called TikTok." And I've seen your willingness to just swim to what we call these blue oceans and just bask out there in the water. And it's ambitious, and it's, I see it as one of your staples of success. But tell the listeners, I don't think most people know that at one time you had thousands of TikTok followers, and I think still do at this point. I know you do less content than you did before, but how did you always seem to be on the cusp of what's coming out next. I can remember when you started taking the photos, and people hadn't taken photos, and now I see some of the young lawyers coming up and there's photos and video people following them. It's almost as if they're kind of stepping in the steps of what you had done, what you were emulating from other people. But what was single-handedly the one thing that made you start taking those steps?
I think the first thing was I left the public defender's office in 2019, February or January 31st, 2019. I stopped being a public defender. And so I'd never had that image or tag attached to me, or I outgrew that image or tag shortly thereafter, I would hope anyway. And after I left the public defender's office, I realized that, okay, this is me now. And the only income that I'm going to make is going to be on the income that I bring in. If I don't bring it in, then I don't get to write myself a paycheck, much less all these college kids in the next room that are relying on me to make sure that they can eat Raising Cane's on the weekend. So I just went all chips, all in on me. And I didn't have a big budget for advertising. I couldn't go out and get billboards. I couldn't get commercials on TV. And that's what everyone was saying, is like, "Oh man, you've got to get commercials. You've got to get this. You've got to get that." And I realized that I don't need to, I realized that I can't do that. I didn't have the budget for it then. I honestly don't have the budget much for it now, or don't care to have it, even if I could. And there's so many ways to spend small dollars to get big results, whether that be on taking a chance on TikTok, which, mind you, I had been watching that for a few months, and then I started just making little pieces of content, trying to make funny stuff that would get views.
How many years ago was it that you got on TikTok?
It was pre-COVID. I know that. So it was, I believe, the winter of 2019.
I just felt like, what is this TikTok? And then I came in one day and you have your fathers in there running the TikTok meter, telling me that a paycheck's coming in from TikTok. And I thought, what is this craziness that's going on? Then all of a sudden, I remember, I guess the point with me is when we went to eat somewheres, And this younger person said, "Hey, you're that lawyer on TikTok." And I thought, I think I need to figure out what TikTok is. Keith has figured it out. This blue water sense that you have where you sail to an area that people weren't. There was nobody in DWI. Although everybody was doing DWI, nobody was specifically doing it. What's been some of the bumps along the way in being a person who's willing to play out there in that blue water where nobody else is at?
You have to be really comfortable being uncomfortable. Something that I'll say that in my personal life I'm not good at, but in my professional life I've somehow always been able to do that. I've been very confident in myself in my professional life in doing that. So, but it's very uncomfortable. You're going to find that you have a lot of failures and a lot of naysayers. And even whenever you put yourself on the internet and you're saying more or less that just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty, whenever you're being brave enough to say that, and you're going to attract haters real quick. And those haters, they can get in between your ears if you let them. I was guilty of it. That's why I kind of fell off the map for a few months. I let the haters get too close, and they really sucked my creativity. And I think I've done a really good job here recently in kind of getting back on board with TikTok and posting regularly. And also we're expanding. Obviously, we finally started a podcast, something that we have talked about for 2 years. We've just gone all chips, all in on this sort of thing, because the fact of the matter is that content is king, and you've got to be willing to take risks.
As you look at the people that are coming into the field today, it's hard to believe. I'm 11 years in. I believe you're 9 years in. What's the advice you give to the young people? We're young, but the people who are day one lawyers, what do you look a day one lawyer in the face and say?
You know, I don't have to speculate about this because a close friend of ours, I remember when Bree, I hope you listen to this. I hope you hear this. And Bree, I hope you do not mind me telling this story. Ouachita Davis, who has actually gone on to find her own success that probably outweighs mine in numerous ways, being that she now represents Kevin Gates. But I remember whenever...
And she's wildly successful and a great person. just I remember meeting her a couple years ago, and she diced me up in a hearing, and I called her afterwards, and it was a great conversation. But Ouachita is a great person and just a great attorney. So
with that out of the way, I remember when I saw Bree in courtroom 5 of Judge Jefferson's courtroom, and she had been thrown to the wolves because Judge Jefferson is an excellent judge, but you had better be on your P's and Q's. And those clients that you get when you're a public defender and they are currently incarcerated, they don't hold back on you. And I saw that she was saying a few things and just having a little trouble getting her feet under. And I remember I said, "Hey, let me get you out here in the hall for just a minute." And I said, "Hey, I'm Keith. I was in your position in 2016. I know you're brand new, and I was exactly where you are now. Let me tell you what I would do if I were in your position." And I told her that you've got to see your clients, specifically the clients in jail, on a regular basis, and you've got to be willing to stand up for what you know is right. And that may be in front of a judge and that may be in front of a prosecutor, but sometimes it's going to be in front of your client. Sometimes you've got to be willing to call your client out on something just as quickly as you call out the state or the prosecutor or the state or the judge on something. So be bold, be brave, be consistent, take care of your people. And I think I even told her something that Judge Johnson told me back in 2013. I was down in the basement talking to his wife, Adrienne, whenever I was an extern at the district attorney's office, and Judge Johnson was down there. And I was talking to him about what I was hoping to do, what my plans were. And he just said, well, Keith, just remember, there's always room at the top. And I think I told her that. There's always room for someone at the top. And so that's what I've been striving after. That's the advice that I would give to any young lawyer that's willing to go all chips, all in on themselves.
I've seen Keith Whiddon, the school teacher. We've seen Keith Whiddon, the insurance defense attorney, the DCFS attorney with legal services, on to criminal defense. Even saw you in the personal injury iteration. We've had long hair, we've had short hair, we've had buzzed hair. What's the Keith Whiddon we're going to see in the future?
I'm really glad you asked this question. I've been wrestling with this for about the last 2 weeks, and there's something that I figured out in the last 2 weeks. We've talked about advertising a little bit, and we've talked about doing this or that when it comes to your social media, your content. There's a lesson that I learned, and I learned it the hard way. As I learned most of my lessons, or I've learned most of my lessons in the last 5 years, I like to learn lessons the hard way, clearly. And one of the lessons that I've learned the hard way in this last year is that you cannot write a check, you can't swipe your credit card enough to replace faith in yourself. And if you are going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a criminal defense lawyer, if you're going to make balloon animals at the park, if you have a vision for yourself, you have to be crystal clear on that vision that you have for yourself. And in that vision, you have to have absolute faith in yourself. And that's what I have learned in this last 2 weeks. That's what I screwed up. If you ask me what my screw up in 2021 was, for the first time, it wasn't something in my personal life.
Well, that's a kudos. We all appreciate it when we get to read about it, but
I'm
glad it wasn't there.
Exactly. It wasn't there this time. This time, it was in my professional life. I finally cleared out all the cobwebs and took ownership of a few skeletons in my closet. And then I said, okay, that's fixed. And my professional life has been going great because I worked so hard at it all this time. I can just kind of coast for a little while now, right? And so I entered 2021 on autopilot. I did what I was supposed to. We grew in 2021, but it wasn't enough. And the reason why is because I thought that with these people helping with advertising and that person, kind of give me an attaboy, every other week, that kind of thing, that it would just kind of happen. And I found out that it doesn't. So I have to have the unfettered faith in myself. And then the faith shines through in the work.
I always like to say it to people. Nobody carries out your vision when you're gone. That's whether you're at this office or you're at your house. Your vision is your vision, and only you can carry it out. And it sounds like you've kind of learned that lesson in the last year. You can outsource a lot of things, but the vision you can't.
You cannot outsource the vision. You cannot outsource the faith. And, being in the religious South as we are, we all grow up hearing in Bible school and Sunday school, faith without works is dead. And while I am hardly a biblical scholar, I do know, and I fear in the last 2 weeks, that if I'm not putting in the work, then my vision and my faith for my business, for myself, and for my profession and my professional growth are meaningless.
I think one of the next to last questions is this. I heard you talk about it's on you. Your vision, your faith, it's on you. You have to carry it. You hear people talk about in this field, And I heard Alexander Shannara, he said it. He said, in Alabama, I get 10% of the personal injury cases. And the lawyers come to me and they say, but you get all the cases. He said, why aren't you worried about the other 90%? I've seen it in the numbers in our business, bankruptcy business. We build clients. If they don't hire us, they typically just don't hire anybody else. In your industry, which is criminal defense and specifically DWI defense, you do a lot more than DWI defense, but that's your extreme specialty. Do you create clients? And do you feel as if you have to compete against everybody else?
I want to say this without sounding braggadocious. I don't want this to come across as being not humble, but then again, I have been accused of being quite arrogant, so I might as well go for it. I'll say this. Here's how I'm going to put it. If a client wants someone who's going to tell them that it's going to be okay, or if a client wants someone who is going to just find a way to solve their problems and make them feel good about themselves, I'm probably not going to be the lawyer for them. I am not a hold your hand kind of lawyer. I'm not, I don't have a good bedside manner. I'm very matter of fact about things with my clients, but that also translates into me being very matter of fact whenever that cop is on cross-examination. It comes as being very matter of fact whenever that judge asks, but what about this detail or what about that detail? And I'm able to remind the judge that no, the detail was this, and here's the training manual on it. If you want a lawyer that's just going to kind of work something out or maybe make a phone call, I'm probably not for you because that's not me. My strength is in that I'm going to go in there with an eye towards winning this thing with muscle and might and a healthy aggression.
The last question we always propose in this podcast. You know it's coming. I can see it on your face. It's the only question you probably knew that existed, other than me to ask about your long hair and your short hair. But that being said, the place that you found this field in, how do you intend on leaving this field and making it a better place? What mark are you going to leave in this area when you're gone? And what mark do you want to leave?
So there are a few different ways that I can answer this. I think the first one is that when it comes to our business, Erase My Arrest, helping people expunge their records, clear their records, that's something that I want to see grow into a national product. I want people from all 50 states to be able to find a lawyer that will help them get their expungement. And the fact of the matter is that you and I can't be in Louisiana one day and California another and Maryland the third. It's going to take a team. But I have the vision and the faith that Erase My Arrest is in fact going to be a national product that helps people from all 50 states clear their record and better their lives for themselves and their families. That aside, with that one out of the way, when it comes to the criminal defense space, the reason why I love criminal defense, the reason why I do what I do, the reason why I'm not interested in being a prosecutor, the reason why I'm not interested in doing insurance defense is because at the end of the day, no matter what my client is accused of, whether it be DWI or something horrendous, my client does have a name and he has a face. And he probably has a family and someone out there that genuinely cares about him or her and loves him or her. And I may never change the world, and I'm okay with that. My goal is to change the world for one person at a time, and I plan on doing that by helping people and their family members that they love and care about, whether it be stay at home so that way they can continue to provide for their family, or maybe it is reduce a sentence or reduce exposure on bad behavior so they can get back to the people that they love a little bit sooner, or otherwise hold police officers and hold the state accountable and make them prove their case. It's accountability, and it's changing the world for one person at a time. That is what I hope I bring to this space, and whenever I leave this space, I hope that that is what I am remembered for.
Well, thank you, Keith. And again, that's been Keith Whiddon. He's one half of Erase My Arrest, Whiddon Criminal Defense. I'm Devin Jones, one half of Erase My Arrest and EOM Young Law. Together, we're the Citizen Effect Podcast. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Awesome.